Welcome to Lattes with Julie, where we sip, chat, and navigate this thing called life together. Whether it's work, love, parenthood, friendships, or all those messy but still beautiful moments in between, this is our space for real conversations and fresh perspectives. So, grab your cup and settle in because we are doing life together, one sip at a time. Guys, I cannot believe I'm about to say this after waiting to start this for so long, but here goes. Welcome to the very first episode of Lattes with Julie. I am so excited to finally be here doing this and sharing this moment with you. I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I know there are a million other things you could be doing at this very moment, but I'm just so grateful that you've chosen to spend this moment in time right here with me. So, we need to create a setting, an ambience for this space, right? And here's what. You know how you walk into a coffee shop and there's that corner of the restaurant that has the cozy seats? You know, the ones that people never seem to want to get up from, especially when you're waiting for those particular seats? I'd like you to think of this space as that part of your favorite coffee joint or restaurant. So, grab your cuppa of whatever you like to sip on. I've got my latte here. And let's get into the first sip. That's what I'm calling this first episode, which is the story behind this podcast. I'll spill all the deets on the deep pour, and that's next. The reason why it's so thrilling for me to be able to finally do this is because I have literally had to overcome me, myself, and I just to get here. I've been sitting on this idea for years, I kid you not. You know how you have that thing in your heart, something you just know that you should do, something that you need to do, but you keep putting it off, right? That was me with this podcast. I kept telling myself that I'd do it when the time was right. I mean, I didn't even know what the right time looked like, or if I would even get a feeling when the so-called right time finally came around. I also told myself that I needed to get the right setup, and so I spent months on Google just looking around. Never mind that I never made any practical step towards the direction of finding the right setting. Well, I am here several years after I first got the idea to do a podcast to tell you that quote-unquote magical moment I was waiting for never magically appeared. You know, if I'm to be completely honest with you, at some level, I knew that there would never be a magical moment where I felt like the stars aligned or got goosebumps and I knew it was time. And I guess the more time I took in planning this out, the more I kept myself away from doing it. How crazy is that? But you see, one thing that I've found out through this process is that procrastination doesn't always look like you idly or passively just waiting for the right moment and doing nothing in the meantime. And it doesn't always sound like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it next week or I love working under pressure or it's the adrenaline rush for me. Procrastination doesn't always sound like that. Sometimes, and that was the case with me, procrastination can actually camouflage in the planning or preparation where you get lost in making plans, but you never actually get round to finally executing those plans. We tell ourselves, like in my case, I kept telling myself that I was getting ready, I was researching, I was planning, I was perfecting every detail, when in reality, I was simply just stalling. From my experience getting here, over-planning can feel productive, you know, like you're working out all the details, you're crossing the T's and you're dotting the I's, and you feel like you're actually doing something. But if you're to be honest with yourself, it's often fear in disguise, because you know that once you stop planning and preparing, you will have nothing else to do but execute the plan, and that's what scares the living daylights out of you, right? You see, ideally, the planning and preparation are supposed to lead you to the execution, right? But in this kind of twisted dynamic that I was in, the planning and preparation actually kept me and prevented me from the implementation, and deliberately so. You see, the real issue, like I said, is fear. The fear that I had to start this because I didn't know how it would go. What if it flops? Or what if in reality it's nothing compared to what I envision in my mind? That's what you think on one hand. And then on the other hand, you also don't want to quit and have to deal with the thoughts of you chickened out, or you said you would do this and you didn't. You don't want to deal with that either. So what do you do? What did I do? For me, I lost myself in that perpetual phase of planning and preparing, and it felt like a comfortable compromise. Imagine that. It was a comfortable compromise because on the one hand, I'm not idly sitting by or passively just waiting for the right time to come. I'm planning and I'm preparing, right? But also on the other hand, I'm not calling myself out for not pushing myself to get it over and done with. Because why? Yup, I'm planning, I'm preparing to start. And so what did I do? I kept on planning and preparing and planning and preparing. I mean, it's enough to drive you crazy. But you want to know something funny? I did not implement a single thing I prepared for over the years to begin this podcast. I actually did not use a single thing I was preparing or planning or finding out details about. No, I just woke up one morning and boom, set to work on doing the trailer. Okay, I'll be honest. So the final kick in the butt actually came from my son. A few weeks ago, I was talking to someone about starting the podcast, and I hadn't even realized that he was listening, and he'd actually been listening to me going on and on and on about how I was going to launch this podcast soon. So after I finished that conversation, my son goes like, "Mom, you've been planning to start this podcast for so long. How long does it take to start?" I kid you not when I say I wanted to run to the hills, but then there wasn't a hill in sight, not even a molehill. I just stood there, feeling the sheer embarrassment blowing against me like a gust of wind. And in that moment, I knew I was either going to start this or stop talking about it ever again. I was forever going to hold my peace about it and shelve it forever, or just start, but I was never going to allow my son to be in a place where they start believing that all mama does is talk, and then talk some more. But when it comes to implementing the talk, that is where she draws the line. It was so embarrassing for me that moment. And I decided I was either going to start or I was never going to talk about it again. But I was not going to prepare for another day. So here I am, finally taking the leap. But really beyond procrastination, Lattes with Julie was born out of my love for deep, meaningful conversations. I'm a communicator, a broadcast journalist, and a public speaker. I hosted the breakfast show for one of the national radio stations in Kenya for over 5 years. And I believe it is during that time, hosting different people on the show, from the joys of celebrating with an artist or author that had been, nominated or even won a prestigious award, whether it was that or the heartbreak behind the scenes of talking through the situation with a mother who had to break the news to their child of why it is they were almost always in hospital and couldn't be out to play with other children like other children did, because they had this thing called cancer and the child couldn't even wrap their heads around what cancer is or what it means. Such heartbreaking moments. It is in those moments, I think, that I developed this love for deep and meaningful conversations, and sometimes not so meaningful conversations, because the nature of a breakfast show. You have meaningful and not so meaningful conversations, but it's just that talking to someone and listening to them, actively listening. I can confidently say that it was my time on the breakfast show that I actually developed this passion and love for deep, meaningful conversations. Also, if you know me, you know that I am literally obsessed with coffee. I love coffee so much that I am actually part of a coffee and chat group here in Nairobi. And I remember when my sister Helen heard the name Lattes with Julie, she said it was so in brand with me. That's how much I love this black, or is it deep brown liquid? Yeah, somewhere in between. And I'll tell you what, in the next episode, I'll be sure to tell you where I got this sentimental attachment to coffee because, believe me, it didn't just happen. Let's be real, people. I am not coming here as an expert. I'm not even an armchair shrink. I am none of that. I don't have all the answers and I will never pretend to. I am a mom of 2 lovely boys, a woman, a fitness enthusiast, a sister, a friend, a daughter. And just like you, I'm also just trying to figure stuff and people and life out as I go. And that's what makes this space very special to me. Because we are doing life together, and that's the vibe I want to create. No scripts, no perfection, just real, honest conversations. So, what can you expect from Lattes with Julie? Well, each episode will be short and sweet, just 25 minutes of your time. And we'll start each episode with Brew and Begin, which is a little warm-up, a thought or a little story, an anecdote or a question to set the mood. So, the story about my sentimental attachment to coffee, right from when I was a little girl, that's going to be our Brew and Begin on the next episode. After Brew and Begin, we'll dive into what we'll be calling the deep pour, and this will be the heart of our conversations. Sometimes it'll just be me, and sometimes I'll have incredible guests sharing with us their journeys. And then we'll wrap up each episode with the last drop, which will be a moment of reflection, inspiration, or just our big takeaways from the conversation. I mean, let's face it, life is already too hectic as it is, and we all need a little pause for the last drop, no? So whether we are talking about the beauty and the challenges of life, the messy parts of parenting, navigating work, relationships, purpose, or just those everyday things that no one really prepares us for, I just want this podcast to feel like sitting down with a friend. Now that we've got the first sip of how this came to be and why Lattes with Julie, I'll be right back with the last drop of today's conversation. So I shared with you a little about my struggle with procrastination, having put off doing this podcast among many other things in my life for years. And before I close this episode, I really do need you to remember this. There is absolutely nothing wrong with planning and preparation. They are essential because they give us direction and they give us structure and a sense of readiness. I mean, let's face it, I am all for spontaneity, but you cannot just hop out of bed, grab a microphone and say, woohoo, world, here I am with my podcast. There's a level of preparation and there's a level of getting ready. So there's nothing wrong with that. However, you know what they say about too much of a good thing? I feel like when overdone, preparation and planning, they can and do tend to shift from being a stepping stone into what we are working towards to becoming a stumbling block, keeping us from the very same thing that we are doing all that planning and preparation for. The more we overthink and tweak and wait for the quote-unquote perfect moment, the more we stay stuck in the same place. You see, there's a fine line between being prepared and being paralyzed by preparation. And looking back at my own journey, I think the key for me was just knowing when to stop planning and actually start doing. Because you know what? Progress doesn't come from perfect plans. It comes from action. So here we are, episode 1 of Lattes with Julie finally out into the world. Yay! And this is just the first step of this journey and the first sip of this cuppa called Lattes with Julie. And I'm so delighted that you took the time to share this with me. I would really love for you to be part of this journey. Please subscribe, follow, share, and let's build this community together. And hey, if there's a topic you'd love for me to explore, please let me know in the comments section. Many thanks for tuning in to Lattes with Julie and for sharing this first sip with me. Until next time, take care and let's keep doing life together, one sip at a time.